Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. I'm making the final video, it looks like, to be the final video in my series analyzing the passion of Jesus. Anything after this point is post-resurrection appearances, and many people have written different works on analyzing the post-resurrection appearances and things like that. So maybe in the future I'll make videos on it, but for now, since I promised to only deal with the passion, that's what we're going to do. I'll put the link in the description section to the video that comes before this, and if you're just tuning in, I encourage you to watch all the way back to the first video in order so you can see what's going on here. We ended with Jesus being taken off of the cross in the previous video, and then being basically the burial rites being done by Joseph of Arimathea. In the Gospel of John, we're told that Nicodemus as well was there to do this, and then placed into the tomb. And we know how the story goes. The rest of the story, according to the Gospels, is that Sunday morning, the women come to the tomb. Depending on which Gospel you read, depends on why they went to the tomb and things like this. A number of the Gospels say that they went there to anoint him. And the thing is that there's a couple cultural problems already afoot when you look at that. The first thing is that Jesus was properly buried. I've heard some Christians argue that the women went there to give him a more proper burial. The thing is that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, in all intents and purposes, they gave him they wrapped him up and they put him in the tomb. He was thus buried. The thing is that according to Jewish culture, you're not supposed to go and dig someone up or go open up someone's grave after they've been in there for already 2 or 3 days. That's not something that's done in Jewish culture. According to Jewish culture, it's unheard of. It's actually considered sinful for women in general to actually handle the bodies of the deceased. But in Jewish culture, you do not have people going in and messing with people's bodies after they are actually dead. So, having established that, the idea that they would go in there, in fact, I don't know of any culture, the ones you're 6 feet under, or in the case of Jesus, in a plot, in a tomb, that you go in and start messing with their body. And to anoint his dead body with oils is actually, it's overkill, no pun intended, because as we know earlier in the narrative, Jesus, when the unnamed woman anoints him, he says that she has anointed him for his burial. So according to Jesus himself, a woman had already anointed his body, but that's just something to consider. However, the thing is that is there anything in Jewish culture that we can point to that from the Talmud that tells us what these women were doing? What was their motive? If we go to the Talmud, and I'll post a link to my blog where I have replicated the article written by my Orthodox Jewish friend Mateo, who wrote the article. Props to him. We can find that according to the Jewish culture, as outlined in the Talmud, we are told that it was customary to send out people into the cemeteries to see if someone was still alive, because according to Jewish culture, there have been a number of cases where people they were assumed to have been dead, and then they were buried, and then they ended up being alive. So it was Jewish practice to send people out into the cemeteries or to the graveyards, to a grave, and see if someone was still alive. And this is as close as we can get to actual real historical and cultural data here which the Gospels are talking about. So the motive of these people was to go out and see if he was alive, implying that they didn't actually think that he was clinically dead when they did this. Just want to double check and make sure. According to Jewish culture as well, the fact remains that you were not considered clinically dead until the 4th day. The reason for this is that, according to the Talmud, and again, please see my references, according to the Talmud, days 1, 2, and 3, your soul had a chance to reunite with the body. The soul was sitting next to the body and had a chance. It did not realize that it was separated quite yet, and would attempt to get in, make these attempts to get back in, and thus someone could be alive. So it wasn't until the fourth day that you were considered clinically dead. Up until that point, you were considered sleeping, merely sleeping, or in a metaphorical sense, you were considered dead, but you were not clinically dead, as in you were not going to come back ever. And so the idea is that, for those of you out there who are still doubting the authenticity of the Talmud, the question then remains, is there anything in the New Testament to back up what I just said, that the fourth day was considered, that's it, you're not coming back? In fact, there is. If you go to chapter 11 of the Gospel of John, you'll see this is the resurrection of Lazarus. And we know that up until the point, starting around verse 9 through 16, you have Jesus telling his disciples that our friend Lazarus is asleep. And they are viewing it just as Jews would be. Okay, well, if he's asleep, you can revive him, can't you? But then Jesus is saying, after several of the days have gone by, our friend Lazarus is dead. He's died. Indicating that no, actually Lazarus is dead. When they get to Martha, Martha comes forward and says, "Teacher, if you had been here earlier, you could have saved him." Implying that, again, prior to the fourth day, if you had been here, you could have revived him, because Jesus had been bringing people back to the dead. Most of the people he was dealing with, of course, were people who had just died and therefore had not gone beyond the clinically dead stage in Jewish culture. To cement this even further, verse 39 of chapter 11 says, "Jesus said, 'Take away the stone.' Martha, the sister of him who was deceased, said to him, 'Lord, but now he smells, for it is the fourth day that he is there.'" So again, an emphasis on the fourth day. So again, you have this idea that, why is he messing with this? The people are skeptical, and many of the people again invoke this idea. You have this pattern of repeating the fourth day. And as we know, as I said, according to Jewish culture, that the fact remains that you are not clinically dead until the fourth day. Now, Lazarus had been in there for 4 days. He was clinically dead, hence the skepticism. But yet the miracle was that Jesus still was able to bring him out. Or bring him back from the dead, excuse me. So, having established that this is something you find in Scripture, we know also, according to the Talmud, it invokes Hosea chapter 6, verse 2, where it says, "He will revive us after 2 days. He will raise us up on the third day, that we may live before him." So in other words, you have this idea of again invoking Scripture that insinuates that God and also others may have the power to bring you back, even though you have only been in there for 2 or 3 days, going with the understanding, according to Jewish culture, you're not clinically dead until the fourth. So, having said all of that, the fact remains is this. Jesus Christ, according to the Gospels, was only in the grave for 3 days. So, he did not even reach the fourth day, where Jews would have, according to their culture and their theology, would have considered him clinically dead. Hence, that it is necessary to point out that that they never considered him to be clinically dead until if he had reached the fourth day. Hence, people going out to his grave to see if he's still alive. Also, this makes perfect sense why there's an absence in the book of Acts regarding putting a theological emphasis on Jesus' death and resurrection. The idea that this has some sort of theological connotation is virtually missing from the preaching of the Acts of the Apostles. It's mentioned. They say that you killed him and that God brought him back and things like this, but there's no emphasis on atonement for sin or things like this. There's no theological emphasis on this at all. It's almost like it's just a matter of fact. Paul, of course, emphasizes this, but that's a totally different conversation. But it's important to note that in the earliest writings that are allegedly put to the apostles, we have this theological absence for his death and resurrection. According to the Gospels of the Hebrews, Ebionites, and such, the Jewish Christian sources that are dated to the 1st century, the brother of Jesus, James the Just, is in an episode is the first person to see the resurrected Jesus, and Jesus says, "Brother, I have returned from the land of those who are sleeping." Again, connotating the idea that before the fourth day, you are merely sleeping. You are not actually clinically dead. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this series. I hope you enjoyed it, to see the analysis of the Passion, to see some of the interesting cultural and historical things that are sort of mishmashed in there. So thank you everyone for watching. Peace be with you all.